The girl with golden hair stood on the auction block in Butte, Montana, her wrists bound with rough hemp rope while her father negotiated her sale like she was livestock instead of his flesh and blood. Lydia Owens had never imagined her life would come to this, but 3 years of drought had turned her father from a proud rancher into a desperate man willing to do anything to save what remained of his failing cattle operation, even if it meant trading his 20-year-old daughter to a traveling merchant in exchange for horses and supplies that might see them through another brutal Montana winter. The year was 1883, and the Wild West was still wild enough that such transactions happened in shadowed corners of saloons and back alleys where decent folk pretended not to see. Lydia's father had dragged her into the Silver Dollar Saloon just after dawn, before most of the town was awake, hoping to conduct his shameful business without witnesses. But there were always witnesses in places like these. Men who drank away their nights and stayed until morning, cowboys and drifters who had seen worse things than a father selling his daughter, and had long since stopped being surprised by the depths to which desperation could drive a person. The merchant, a weasel-faced man named Silas Burke, circled Lydia like she was a mare he was considering purchasing. He checked her teeth, examined her hands for calluses, asked invasive questions about her health and whether she could cook and clean. Her father answered each question with increasing eagerness, his voice cracking as he tried to convince Burke that she was worth the 6 horses and wagon full of supplies he was asking for. Lydia stood silent through it all, her blue eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the grimy saloon windows, trying to separate her mind from her body, from this moment, from the reality of what was happening. She had tried to run 2 days ago when she first learned of her father's plan. She had made it as far as the edge of their property before he caught her, dragged her back, and locked her in the root cellar. She had screamed herself hoarse, pounded on the door until her hands were bloody, but their nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and her mother had died giving birth to a stillborn son when Lydia was 15. There was no one to hear her, no one to help, no one who cared enough to intervene in what a man chose to do with his own daughter. The negotiation was nearly complete when the saloon doors swung open and a tall figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the rising sun. Lydia barely glanced at the newcomer, too numb with despair to care who else might witness her humiliation. But something about the way the room fell silent made her look up, and she found herself staring at a man who seemed to command attention without saying a word. He was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes so intensely green they seemed to glow in the dim saloon light. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had faced down danger and lived to tell about it. He walked straight to the bar, ordered a whiskey, and drank it down in one swallow before turning to survey the room with those remarkable eyes. When his gaze landed on Lydia, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, though she was certain they had never met. He looked from her bound wrists to her father's guilty expression to Burke's calculating sneer, and his jaw tightened. "What's going on here?" His voice was quiet but carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Burke waved a dismissive hand. "Private business, friend. Nothing that concerns you." "I am making it my concern." The stranger pushed away from the bar and crossed the room in 3 long strides. "Looks to me like you are trying to buy a person, which last I checked was illegal in this territory." Lydia's father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and shame. "This is my daughter, and I will do with her as I see fit. We have an arrangement that benefits both parties." "An arrangement?" The stranger's voice dripped with contempt. He looked at Lydia again, and this time she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen in anyone's eyes for a very long time: genuine concern. "Miss, is this what you want?" It was the first time anyone had asked her opinion about anything in days. Lydia's throat constricted, and for a moment she could not speak. Then she shook her head once, a small movement but unmistakable. The stranger turned back to Burke. "The lady says no. I suggest you take your horses and supplies and find another town to conduct your business." Burke's hand moved toward the pistol at his waist, but he froze when he saw how quickly the stranger's hand had moved to his own weapon. The stranger had not even drawn, but the threat was clear. Burke was outmatched, and everyone in the room knew it. "Now hold on," Lydia's father said, his voice rising in panic. "You cannot just walk in here and interfere with a legal transaction. I need those horses and supplies. My ranch will not survive the winter without them." The stranger studied him for a long moment, and Lydia saw something shift in those green eyes. Not sympathy exactly, but perhaps understanding of what desperation could do to a man's judgment. "How much is Burke offering?" the stranger asked. "6 horses, a wagon full of supplies, enough to see us through until spring." "I will give you 12 horses and 2 wagons of supplies, double what he offered." The room went so quiet Lydia could hear her own heartbeat. Her father's mouth fell open. Burke made a choking sound of protest. And Lydia felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time in days, though she did not quite understand what was happening. You will," her father stammered. "But why would you pay double?" "Because, unlike him, I am not looking to profit from another person's misery." The stranger reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick roll of bills. "I will pay you now in cash the equivalent value. You can buy your own horses and supplies from the general store, but there is one condition." Lydia's father leaned forward eagerly. "Name it." "The moment the money changes hands, your daughter is free. No obligations, no expectations, no strings attached. She can go wherever she wants, do whatever she wants. You will have no further claim on her." Burke sputtered in outrage. "This is absurd. You cannot just buy someone and set them free." "What kind of fool throws away money like that?" The stranger did not even look at him. "The kind who believes every person has the right to choose their own path." "Well, Mr. Owens, do we have an agreement?" Lydia watched her father's face as he wrestled with the decision. She could see greed warring with whatever shreds of paternal affection might still exist in his heart. The greed won, as she had known it would. "Agreed," her father said, reaching for the money. The stranger pulled it back. "First, untie your daughter." Her father's hands shook as he worked at the knots binding her wrists. The moment the rope fell away, Lydia rubbed her chafed skin and took a step back, putting distance between herself and the man who had raised her. She felt nothing but numbness where love should have been. The stranger counted out the bills and handed them to her father, who clutched them like they were salvation itself. Then the stranger turned to Lydia and his expression softened. "You are free now. No one owns you, including me. I did not pay for you, I paid for your freedom." "Do you understand the difference?" Lydia nodded slowly, still not quite believing this was real. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I have a sister about your age, and if someone ever tried to sell her, I would hope a stranger might step in and help." He tipped his hat to her. "My name is Robert Jackson. Most people call me Ryder. If you need a place to stay while you figure out what to do next, I own a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. You would be welcome there, no strings attached. Or if you want to leave Butte entirely, I can give you enough money for a train ticket to anywhere you want to go." Before Lydia could respond, her father grabbed her arm. "Now wait just a minute. The agreement was that she was free, not that she could just run off with nothing. She needs to come back to the ranch and collect her things at least. Ryder's hand moved to his gun again. "Take your hand off her. Now." Her father released her immediately and backed toward the door, clutching his money. "You will regret this, Lydia. You will come crawling back when you realize you have nowhere else to go." "I would rather starve in a ditch than spend another day under your roof," Lydia said, and was surprised by the strength in her own voice. Her father's face twisted with anger, but he said nothing more. He turned and fled the saloon, and Lydia knew she would never see him again. The knowledge brought more relief than sorrow. Burke left shortly after, shooting murderous glances at Ryder, who ignored him completely. When the saloon had emptied of everyone except the bartender, who was wisely pretending not to have witnessed anything, Ryder turned back to Lydia. "I meant what I said. You can go wherever you want. I will help you either way." Lydia looked at this stranger who had just paid a small fortune for her freedom and asked for nothing in return. She had spent 3 days believing her life was over, that she would spend the rest of her days as property, as something less than human. Now she stood here with choices spread out before her like a feast, and she did not know where to begin. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted quietly. "I have no money, no skills beyond ranch work, no family who would take me in. My mother is dead and I have no siblings. My father was all I had." "Then come to my ranch," Ryder said gently. "Just for a few days until you get your bearings. I have a housekeeper named Martha who lives there. She is a good woman, a widow who lost her husband to pneumonia last winter. She could use the company, and you could use a safe place to rest and figure out your next move. I promise you will be safe there. I have ranch hands, but they are good men who would never lay a hand on a woman uninvited." Lydia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity and something else, something that looked almost like pain, as though her situation had touched some old wound in him. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "You could have walked away. You could have let Burke buy me and saved your money. What is 12 horses and 2 wagons worth of supplies to you? A lot less than a human life," Ryder said simply. "And like I said, I have a sister. Her name is Rachel and she is 19. If I ever found out someone had tried to treat her like property, I think I would lose my mind. So maybe I did this as much for her as for you. Maybe I am trying to balance some cosmic scale, hoping that if she ever needs help, a stranger will step in for her the way I stepped in for you." It was the most honest answer Lydia had ever heard, and it broke something loose inside her chest. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall, not here, not in front of this man who had already seen too much of her vulnerability. "Okay," she whispered. "I will come to your ranch, just for a few days." Ryder's smile transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less dangerous. "Good. My horse is tied up outside. We can ride double, or if you would rather wait, I can bring a wagon back for you. I want to leave now. I never want to see this town again." "Then let us go." They walked out of the Silver Dollar Saloon together into the bright Montana morning. Ryder's horse was a magnificent bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Ryder mounted first, then extended his hand to help Lydia up behind him. She had ridden horses her entire life, but never like this, pressed against a man's back with her arms around his waist. It felt intimate and strange and somehow safe all at once. They rode out of Butte as the town was waking up, past the mining operations that had given the settlement its rough character, past the neat houses where respectable families lived, past the last outposts of civilization and into the wild country beyond. The Montana landscape spread out around them in shades of gold and brown and green, vast and empty and beautiful in a way that made Lydia's chest ache. She had lived here her entire life, but had always been confined to her father's failing ranch, never free to simply ride out and see what lay beyond the next hill. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after they had been riding for an hour. "It is not much compared to some of the bigger spreads, but it is mine and I am proud of it," Ryder said. "About 500 acres of good grazing land, a creek that runs year-round, decent timber for building and firewood. I run about 200 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. I have 6 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, plus Martha who keeps the main house running. We do well enough to turn a profit most years, though it is hard work from dawn to dusk during calving season and roundup. How did you come to own it?" "I worked as a ranch hand myself for 6 years, saved every penny I could. When old man Briggs, who owned the place, decided to retire and move back east to live with his daughter, he sold it to me for a fair price. That was 3 years ago. I was 21 and thought I knew everything. I learned real quick how much I still had to figure out. What about your family? You mentioned a sister." "Rachel lives in Helena with my parents. My father is a schoolteacher, my mother a seamstress. They wanted me to follow in my father's footsteps, get an education, teach school, or maybe read law. But I was never cut out for indoor work. I needed space and sky and honest labor that made me tired enough to sleep at night. My sister understands, even if my parents never quite forgave me for choosing this life." Lydia absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the image of a schoolteacher's son with the man who had walked into a saloon and faced down an armed merchant without hesitation. "You move like someone who has had to use that gun before." Ryder was silent for a moment. "I have. Not often, and never because I wanted to. But out here, sometimes violence finds you whether you are looking for it or not. I have always tried to walk away from trouble when I could. But I have also learned that some things are worth fighting for, like a stranger's freedom, especially that." They rode in comfortable silence after that, the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves marking the miles. Lydia found herself relaxing against Ryder's back, the tension slowly draining from her shoulders. She had not felt safe in so long that she had almost forgotten what it was like. Now, riding through the wilderness with a man she had known for only a few hours, she felt safer than she had in her own home. The sun was high overhead when they crested a rise and Ryder pointed ahead. "There. That is the Jackson Ranch." Lydia looked down into a green valley carved by a clear running creek. The ranch house was built of solid timber with a stone chimney, larger than her father's house had been and better maintained. There was a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals with horses moving inside them, and beyond that, cattle grazing on the rich grassland. It looked prosperous and peaceful, the kind of place where a person could build a life. As they rode down into the valley, a woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the sun. She was perhaps 45, sturdy and weathered, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. When she saw Ryder had a passenger, her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Martha, this is Lydia Owens," Ryder said as he dismounted and helped Lydia down. "She is going to be staying with us for a while. Lydia, this is Martha Green, who keeps this place running and keeps me from starving." Martha looked between them with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I see. Well, Miss Owens, you look like you could use a hot bath and a good meal. Come inside with me and we will get you settled." Lydia glanced at Ryder, uncertain. He gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on. You are in good hands with Martha. I need to check on the herd and talk to the hands. I will see you at supper." Martha led Lydia into the house, which was clean and comfortable if not fancy. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a modern cast iron stove, and stairs leading up to what Lydia assumed were bedrooms. The furniture was simple but well made, and there were touches of femininity here and there that suggested Martha had tried to make the bachelor household more homey. "The spare room is upstairs, second door on the right," Martha said. "It has not been used much, but the bed is good and the linens are clean. I will heat water for a bath while you get settled." "Thank you," Lydia said softly. "You are very kind." Martha paused in the doorway to the kitchen and looked back at her. "Ryder is a good man, probably the best I have known. If he brought you here, he had good reason. You do not need to tell me your story unless you want to, but you should know that you are safe here. No one will hurt you or force you to do anything you do not want to do." Tears finally spilled down Lydia's cheeks, and she could not stop them. Martha crossed the room and pulled her into a fierce hug, and Lydia clung to this stranger who offered comfort without questions, without judgment, without expecting anything in return. "Let it out, child," Martha murmured. "Whatever happened, you are here now. You are safe." Lydia wept until she had no tears left, and Martha held her through it all. Over the next few days, Lydia slowly began to believe that she might actually be safe. She slept in the spare room with the door unlocked, and no one tried to enter. She ate meals with Ryder and Martha, and no one made her feel like a burden or an obligation. She wandered the ranch during the day, watching the hands work the cattle, helping Martha with the garden and the chickens, gradually rediscovering what it felt like to simply exist without fear. Ryder was gone most of the day, working alongside his men, but he always made it back for supper. He would wash up at the pump outside, change into a clean shirt, and join them at the table with stories about what had happened that day. A calf born in the south pasture, a fence that needed mending, a mountain lion spotted near the creek. He treated Lydia with unfailing courtesy, never presuming, never pushing, always giving her space to breathe and heal. On the fourth evening, as they sat on the porch after supper watching the sun set over the mountains, Lydia finally found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind. "What will happen to me? I cannot stay here forever. I need to figure out how to support myself." Ryder was quiet for a moment, rocking slowly in his chair. "You could stay here and work if you wanted. Martha has been saying for months that she needs help with the house and the garden. It is too much for one person, especially during the busy seasons. I would pay you a fair wage and you would have room and board. It would give you time to save money and decide what you want to do with your life." Lydia studied his profile in the fading light. "Why do you keep helping me?" "Because helping people is not a one-time thing. You were in trouble and I helped, but that does not mean you are suddenly fine and need no more assistance. Real help means sticking around long enough to make sure someone lands on their feet. Most people would not see it that way. Most people did not have a mother who ran a charity kitchen during the Depression of '73. I grew up watching her feed people who could not pay, watching my father teach children to read who could not afford schooling. They taught me that we are all responsible for each other, especially those of us who have more than we strictly need. You are a rare man, Ryder Jackson." He turned to look at her then, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You are a strong woman, Lydia Owens. Not many people could survive what you have been through and still be willing to trust again. I am not sure I do trust, not completely, but I am trying. That is all anyone can ask." They sat in silence as the stars began to appear, and Lydia felt something shifting inside her. It was not just gratitude she felt toward this man, though there was certainly that. It was something deeper, more complicated, something that frightened and excited her in equal measure. She was not ready to name it yet, but she could feel it growing stronger every day. The next morning, Lydia told Martha she wanted to accept Ryder's offer to work on the ranch. Martha's face lit up with genuine pleasure, and she immediately began teaching Lydia the rhythms and routines of the household. How to make bread that would feed hungry ranch hands, how to preserve vegetables for the winter, how to doctor sick chickens and collect eggs without getting pecked. Lydia threw herself into the work, grateful for the structure and purpose it provided. As the weeks passed, she found herself settling into life on the Jackson Ranch in ways she had never imagined possible. She learned the names of all the ranch hands: Tom, Will, Charlie, Frank, Miguel, and old Pete, who had been cowboying since before the war. They were good men, as Ryder had promised, rough around the edges but respectful. They tipped their hats when she brought water out to them during the hot afternoon hours, and they always thanked her for the meals she helped prepare. She learned the names of Ryder's favorite horses: Dakota, his bay gelding; Storm, a gray mare with a temperamental streak; Copper, a sorrel who was gentle enough for beginners. She learned which cattle were prone to wandering, which sections of fence needed constant maintenance, where the best fishing spots were along the creek. But most of all, she learned about Ryder himself. She learned that he woke before dawn every morning and always checked on the horses first. She learned that he could not carry a tune to save his life but hummed while he worked anyway. She learned that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a horse that had thrown him when he was 16, and another on his hand from a knife fight he refused to discuss in detail. She learned that he was patient with animals and people alike, that he never raised his voice in anger, that he paid his hands more than most ranchers because he believed they deserved a living wage. She learned that he sent money home to his parents every month, even though they had never needed it, because it made him feel like he was still connected to them despite the distance and the differences in their lives. And she learned that when he looked at her, which he did more and more often as the days went by, there was something in his eyes that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. Not as property, not as an obligation, not as a burden, but as a person, as a woman, as someone worth looking at simply for the pleasure of it. The attraction was mutual and undeniable, though neither of them acted on it. Lydia was still healing from the trauma of nearly being sold, still learning to trust again, still figuring out who she was beyond her father's daughter. And Ryder, for all his confidence in other areas of life, seemed almost shy around her, as though afraid that any advance might be unwelcome after what she had been through. The tension between them built slowly, like pressure before a storm. It was in the way their hands would brush when passing dishes at the dinner table, in the way she would catch him watching her while she worked in the garden, in the way he would linger on the porch after Martha had gone to bed, hoping she would come out and sit with him under the stars. Martha noticed, of course. She said nothing directly, but she started finding reasons to leave them alone together. Errands that needed running in town, friends who needed visiting, evening walks she absolutely had to take for her health. Lydia suspected Martha was matchmaking, and found she did not mind nearly as much as she should have. The breaking point came on a warm evening in late August, nearly 2 months after Lydia had arrived at the ranch. A storm had been building all afternoon, dark clouds piling up over the mountains, the air thick and electric with the promise of rain. Lydia was on the porch watching the lightning dance on the horizon when Ryder joined her, his shirt damp with sweat from a day spent mending fences. "Going to be a big one," he said, leaning against the porch railing beside her. "We might lose some shingles off the barn roof. Is there anything we should do to prepare? The animals are all secured. Nothing to do now but wait it out." They stood in companionable silence, watching the storm approach. The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet earth and ozone. "Lydia," Ryder said suddenly, and there was something in his voice that made her turn to look at him. "I need to tell you something, okay? When I saw you in that saloon, bound and being sold like you were nothing, it made me angrier than I have been in years. But it was not just anger, it was also fear. Fear that I might not be able to stop it, that I might have to watch you be taken by that monster and not be able to do anything about it. But you did stop it, I know, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. But here is the thing I did not expect. I thought once you were safe, once you were settled here and healing, that would be enough. I thought I could help you and then watch you leave when you were ready, and I would be satisfied knowing I had done the right thing." Lydia's heart was pounding. "And now I realize I do not want you to leave. Not ever. I know that is selfish. I know you probably need time and space. I know I should not be saying this. But I cannot keep pretending that you are just someone I helped, someone who is working on my ranch temporarily. You have become so much more than that to me." The rain was falling harder now, but neither of them moved toward shelter. Lydia felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump, about to fall, about to fly. "What am I to you?" she asked quietly. Ryder turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his green eyes took her breath away. "Everything. You are everything to me. I think I started falling for you the moment you shook your head when I asked if being sold was what you wanted. I saw the strength in you then, the refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. And every day since, I have fallen harder. The way you laugh at Martha's terrible jokes, the way you sing to the chickens when you collect eggs, the way you are not afraid to get your hands dirty. The way you rebuilt yourself from nothing and became someone even stronger than before. Ryder." His name came out as barely more than a whisper. "I am not asking for anything," he continued quickly. "I am not expecting anything. I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that if you do decide to leave, it will not be because I want you to go. It will be because that is what you choose, and I will respect your choice. But if any part of you might consider staying, not just as someone who works here, but as someone who belongs here, as someone who might build a life here with me, then I am asking you to think about it. Take all the time you need. There is no pressure, no expectation. I just wanted you to know that the option exists if you want it." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, and in that moment, Lydia knew with absolute certainty what her answer was. She had known for weeks, really, but had been too afraid to admit it. She had been traded for horses and supplies, had been treated like property, had been shown that the person who should have loved her most in the world valued her less than livestock. But Ryder had given her something infinitely more valuable than freedom. He had given her the chance to choose her own path, to decide for herself what kind of life she wanted to live. And now, standing in the rain with thunder rolling overhead, she knew exactly what she wanted. "I do not need time," she said, stepping closer to him. "I already know my answer." Hope and fear warred on his face. "You do?" "Yes, I want to stay, not just to work here, not just to have a safe place to live. I want to stay because being here with you makes me happier than I have ever been. Because when I imagine my future, you are in it. Because I think I am falling in love with you, and that terrifies me, but not as much as the thought of leaving and never knowing what we could have been together." Ryder's face transformed, joy radiating from him like sunlight. "You mean it. I mean it." He reached for her then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, when she instead leaned into his touch, he cupped her face in his hands like she was something precious and breakable. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice," he said. "I will protect you and cherish you and give you every reason to keep choosing me, every single day. I know you will." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Lydia felt something broken inside her finally begin to heal. This was nothing like the leering looks Burke had given her, nothing like the appraising way men had examined her on that auction block. This was tenderness and passion and respect all woven together, a promise made without words. They stood in the rain and kissed like they were the only two people in the world, and maybe in that moment they were. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and soaked to the skin, Ryder laughed and took her hand. "We should probably get inside before we catch pneumonia." "Probably," Lydia agreed, but she did not move. "Or we could stay out here and dance in the rain like idiots." "I have never danced in the rain." "Then we are doing it." Ryder pulled her into his arms and began to waltz across the porch, humming tunelessly, and Lydia laughed harder than she had in years. They danced until the rain stopped and the stars came out, until Martha appeared in the doorway with knowing eyes and dry towels, until they were shivering and exhausted and deliriously happy. The next morning, Ryder rode into town and returned with a telegram he had sent to his family in Helena, informing them that he was courting someone and they should expect to meet her soon. Martha baked a cake to celebrate, and the ranch hands made increasingly terrible jokes about Ryder finally settling down. Over the following weeks, Lydia and Ryder navigated the transition from friends to courting couple with surprising ease. They already knew each other so well, had already built a foundation of trust and respect that most couples took years to develop. The romance felt natural, inevitable, like something that had always been meant to happen. They took long rides together across the ranch, Lydia on Storm and Ryder on Dakota, racing across the open grassland with the wind in their hair. They sat on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing, their hands intertwined, their shoulders touching. They stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was looking, though the ranch hands always seemed to know and would whistle and hoot until Ryder chased them off. In September, Ryder's family came to visit. His parents were exactly as he had described them, his father scholarly and kind, his mother practical and warm. His sister Rachel was bright and funny, and she pulled Lydia aside within an hour of arriving. "I need to thank you," Rachel said seriously. "Thank me, for what?" "For making my brother happy. I have never seen him like this. He has always been the serious one, the responsible one, the one who took care of everyone else. But with you, he is different, lighter, more himself. So thank you for seeing him for who he really is and loving him anyway." Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. "He saved my life, did he tell you? He told us you needed help and he provided it. That is how he would put it anyway. He would never make himself out to be a hero. But he is one. My father was going to sell me to a merchant and Ryder stepped in. He paid double what the merchant offered and set me free immediately. He gave me my life back and asked for nothing in return." Rachel's eyes widened. "He did not tell us that part. He just said you needed a place to stay. That is because he does not think what he did was extraordinary. He thinks it was just basic human decency." "That sounds like my brother." Rachel squeezed her hand. "But between you and me, I think you might have saved him right back. He was so lonely out here, even if he would never admit it. He poured everything into this ranch because he had nothing else to pour it into. Now he has you, and I think that makes all the difference." The visit went wonderfully. Ryder's parents approved of Lydia, and his father made her promise to write to them regularly. His mother gave her the family's recipes for various preserves and baked goods, and Rachel made her swear to come visit in Helena soon. The night after they left, Ryder proposed. They were sitting by the creek, watching the moon rise over the water, when he pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "I know it has only been 3 months," he said. "I know most people would say we should wait longer, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I want to marry you, Lydia. I want to build a life with you here on this ranch. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to face whatever comes together, the good times and the hard times and everything in between. So I am asking, will you marry me?" Lydia looked at the ring, then at his face, and felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. 3 months ago she had been standing on an auction block believing her life was over. Now she was sitting beside a creek with a man who loved her, offering her everything she had ever wanted. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. They were married in October, with Martha as Lydia's matron of honor and Tom as Ryder's best man. The ceremony took place on the ranch under an arch of fall foliage, with Ryder's family and the ranch hands and half the town of Butte in attendance. Lydia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, and Ryder wore a new suit that was only slightly uncomfortable. The preacher asked if anyone objected, and Lydia held her breath, half expecting her father to appear and make a scene. But the moment passed without incident, and she felt the last chains of her past fall away. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her like he had that first night in the rain, and everyone cheered. The reception was held in the barn, with tables piled high with food and a fiddler playing dancing music. Ryder and Lydia danced the first dance, and then Ryder danced with his mother and sister while Lydia danced with his father, and then each of the ranch hands in turn. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Martha pulled Lydia aside. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small box into Lydia's hands. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the box was a delicate silver locket. Lydia opened it and found a tiny photograph of herself and Ryder that had been taken in town the week before. "Martha, this is beautiful, thank you." "You are welcome here, Lydia. You have always been welcome, but now it is official. This is your home and we are your family. Never forget that." Lydia hugged her fiercely, this woman who had been a mother to her when she needed one most. That night, Lydia and Ryder moved into the main bedroom together, the room that had been his alone for 3 years. It felt right, climbing into that bed beside him, feeling his arms wrap around her as she rested her head on his chest. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Good. I intend to keep you that way for the rest of our lives." "That is a tall order. I am up for the challenge." They made love for the first time that night, gentle and slow, learning each other's bodies with the same care they had taken in learning each other's hearts. It was nothing like the horror Lydia had imagined during those dark days when she thought she would be Burke's property. This was love and trust and partnership, two people choosing each other freely and completely. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Ryder traced patterns on her shoulder and spoke quietly. "I need you to know something. What your father did, trying to sell you, it was wrong. It was evil. You did not deserve that, and it was not your fault. You are not damaged goods or used property or anything else that horrible people might have made you feel. You are strong and beautiful and worthy of love. You always were, even when you could not see it yourself." Lydia felt tears slide down her cheeks. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I pay attention. Because you matter to me more than anything else in this world. I love you, Ryder Jackson." "I love you too, Lydia Jackson." Her new name settled over her like a blessing, the final proof that she was no longer her father's property but her own person, a woman who had chosen her own path and found happiness at the end of it. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing from 500 acres to nearly 1,000 as Ryder was able to buy adjacent land from neighbors who were retiring or moving on. The cattle herd grew to over 400 head, and they added horses to their operation, breeding and training them for sale to other ranches and to the army. Lydia proved to have a gift for training horses. She was patient and gentle, and the animals responded to her in ways that amazed even the experienced hands. She started taking on more responsibility for that side of the business, and within a few years, Jackson Ranch was known throughout Montana for producing some of the finest working horses in the territory. In the spring of 1885, Lydia discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous about becoming a mother, worried that she might somehow repeat her father's failures, but Ryder talked her through her fears with his usual patience and wisdom. "You are nothing like him," he reminded her over and over. "You know what it feels like to be unloved and unwanted. You would never do that to a child. You are going to be an amazing mother." Their first child, a boy, was born in November of that year. They named him James Robert Jackson, and he had his father's green eyes and his mother's golden hair. Ryder wept when he held his son for the first time, and Lydia fell in love all over again watching her strong, capable husband reduced to tears by a tiny infant. James was followed by a daughter 2 years later, whom they named Sarah. Then came twin boys, Matthew and Michael, in 1890. The house that had once seemed spacious became crowded and chaotic, filled with the sounds of children laughing and crying and playing. Lydia had never been happier. She proved to be as good a mother as Ryder had predicted, firm but loving, teaching her children to work hard and be kind and stand up for what was right. Ryder was an equally devoted father, taking his sons and daughter out on the ranch as soon as they were old enough to sit a horse, teaching them everything he knew about cattle and land management and the importance of treating animals with respect. Martha remained with them until her death in 1892, a peaceful passing in her sleep at the age of 55. Lydia grieved for her as she would have grieved for a mother, and they buried her in the plot of land behind the house where Ryder's favorite dog was also interred. As the children grew, Lydia made sure they understood the story of how their parents had met. She did not hide the ugly truth of what had almost happened to her, though she presented it in age-appropriate ways. She wanted them to understand that people could do terrible things, but also that there were good people in the world willing to fight against injustice. She wanted them to be like their father, people who saw wrong and stepped in to make it right. "Your father saved me," she would tell them. "Not because he expected anything from me, but because he believed I deserved to be free. That is the kind of person you should strive to be, someone who helps others not for reward, but because it is the right thing to do." The children adored their father and took his lessons to heart. James grew up to be serious and responsible like Ryder, taking over more of the ranch operations as he got older. Sarah was spirited and independent, with her mother's gift for training horses. The twins were mischievous but good-hearted, always getting into trouble but always genuinely remorseful when they were caught. In 1895, when Lydia was 32 and Ryder was 36, Montana officially became a state. They attended the celebrations in Helena with their children, and Ryder's parents hosted a grand party at their home. Rachel, now married to a lawyer and mother of 3 herself, remarked that it seemed fitting that Montana was becoming a state just as the Wild West was finally being tamed. "Do you ever miss it?" Rachel asked Lydia as they watched their children play together. "The wildness, the danger, the sense that anything could happen," Lydia thought about it carefully. "No," she said finally. "I lived through enough danger to last a lifetime. I am grateful for this quieter, safer life. I am grateful for a world where my daughter will never have to fear being sold like property, where my sons will grow up knowing they are loved and valued. That is worth more than any adventure. You are a wise woman, sister. I am a lucky woman. Your brother gave me everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know what that was. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. There were good harvests and bad winters, illnesses survived and injuries healed, moments of laughter and moments of tears. Through it all, Lydia and Ryder remained each other's constant, their love deepening with each passing year. In 1900, on the anniversary of their first meeting in that Butt saloon, they took a rare day off from ranch work and rode out to the spot by the creek where Ryder had proposed. The children were old enough now to handle things without them for a day, and they needed the time alone. They spread a blanket on the grass and lay side by side, watching clouds drift across the bright blue sky. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not walked into that saloon?" Lydia asked. "All the time," Ryder admitted. "It terrifies me to think how close I came to never meeting you. If I had been 5 minutes later, if I had chosen a different saloon, if I had decided to ride straight home instead of stopping in town that day. So many tiny choices that led to that moment. I used to have nightmares about it, about Burke taking me away, about what my life would have been. But I have not had those dreams in years. I think because I finally, truly believe that it is over. That was then, and this is now, and I am safe." "You will always be safe with me," Ryder said fiercely. "I promised you that the day we met, and I will keep that promise until the day I die." "I know you will." Lydia rolled onto her side to look at him, this man who had been her savior and her friend and her husband and the father of her children. His dark hair was starting to show threads of silver at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for fighting for me when I could not fight for myself. Thank you for loving me so completely that I learned how to love myself." Ryder pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life, for choosing to stay when you could have left. For choosing to love me back even though I gave you every reason to be wary of trusting another man. You never gave me a reason not to trust you. From the very first moment, you showed me who you were. A good man, a kind man, a man worth loving. I just had to heal enough to accept that gift." They stayed by the creek until sunset, talking and kissing and simply being together. It was perfect in its simplicity. This day carved out of their busy lives to remember where they had started and celebrate how far they had come. As they rode back to the ranch in the fading light, Lydia felt overwhelmingly grateful for the strange and twisting path that had brought her to this place. She had been bought and sold, treated as property, valued less than horses and supplies. But she had also been given double her worth and set free immediately after, by a man who understood that a person's value could not be measured in livestock or goods. That act of kindness, that moment of seeing her as human when others saw her as commodity, had changed the entire trajectory of her life. It had given her freedom, yes, but more than that, it had given her the chance to discover who she was when she was not defined by her father's failures or society's expectations. And what she had discovered was that she was strong and capable and worthy of love. Ryder had seen that in her before she saw it herself. He had paid double for her freedom and asked for nothing in return, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the ability to choose her own destiny. And she had chosen him, over and over again, every day for 15 years. She would continue choosing him for the rest of her life. As they crested the rise above their ranch and saw the lights glowing in the windows, heard their children's laughter carrying on the evening breeze, Lydia knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Not just in a physical place, but in her heart, in her soul, in every part of her being. This was where she belonged. This was her family. This was her life, and it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. The years rolled on, each one adding new chapters to their story. Their children grew into adults, married, and gave them grandchildren. James took over the ranch operations completely in 1910, allowing Ryder and Lydia to finally slow down and enjoy a quieter pace of life. Sarah opened a horse training facility on the eastern portion of their land, building a reputation that stretched beyond Montana. The twins went into business together, opening a feed and supply store in Butte that served ranchers throughout the region. Ryder's parents passed away peacefully in the mid-1910s, first his father and then his mother a year later. Rachel remained close, visiting several times a year with her own grandchildren. The family stayed tightly knit, bound by love and shared history. In 1920, on the 40th anniversary of their meeting, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. 3 generations of Jacksons filled the house and spilled out onto the grounds, children running everywhere, adults swapping stories and catching up on news. During the celebration, James stood up and called for everyone's attention. When the crowd quieted, he raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast to my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Mom and Dad, you built something remarkable here. Not just this ranch, though it is certainly impressive, but you built a family based on love and respect and the belief that every person has value. You taught us to work hard, to be kind, to stand up for what is right. Those lessons have shaped all of us, and we are passing them on to our own children. So thank you. Thank you for showing us what true love looks like. Thank you for building a legacy worth inheriting." Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Lydia, seated beside Ryder with tears streaming down her face, squeezed his hand. "We did good," she whispered. "We did better than good," Ryder replied. "We did amazing." They lived to see the 1920s transform Montana from frontier territory to modern state. They saw automobiles replace horses on many roads, though the ranch still relied primarily on horseback for working cattle. They saw electricity come to the ranch, indoor plumbing, a telephone line. The world was changing rapidly, but the core of what they had built remained solid. Ryder passed away in his sleep in 1928 at the age of 69. It was peaceful and painless, exactly the kind of death he would have wanted. Lydia mourned him deeply, but she did not regret a single moment of their life together. They had been married for 43 years, had built a ranch and raised a family and loved each other through everything life threw at them. She scattered his ashes at the spot by the creek where he had proposed, where they had returned so many times over the years to remember and celebrate and simply be together. Lydia lived another 7 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all knew the story of how she had been saved by a cowboy who paid double for her freedom. She made sure they understood the full meaning of that story. That love means seeing people for who they truly are, that kindness can change lives, that everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path. When she died in 1935 at the age of 72, she was buried beside Ryder on the hill overlooking their ranch. Her gravestone was simple: Lydia Owens Jackson, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, free. The ranch remained in the family for generations after, passing from James to his children to their children. The story of Ryder and Lydia became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations, a reminder of where they came from and what they stood for. And always, always, the story ended the same way, with a young cowboy walking into a saloon and seeing a young woman who needed saving, and choosing in that moment to do what was right rather than what was easy. With him paying double for her freedom, and setting her free immediately after, expecting nothing, demanding nothing, simply believing that she deserved better than what life had dealt her. With them falling in love slowly and truly, building a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. With them creating something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of her worst moment. It was a love story, pure and simple. A love story set against the backdrop of the Wild West, full of danger and possibility and the endless Montana sky. A love story that proved that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, there are good people in the world willing to fight for what is right. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, one of those good people will fight for you, will see you when others look through you, will value you when others treat you as worthless, will love you when you have forgotten how to love yourself. Ryder Jackson had been that person for Lydia Owens. He had saved her, yes, but more than that, he had given her the tools to save herself. And together, they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a legacy of love and kindness that rippled out through generations. That was the real story. Not just about being traded for horses and supplies, or about the cowboy who gave double and set her free, but about what came after. About two people choosing each other every day, building a life together one moment at a time, creating something beautiful from something broken. About love, in all its messy, complicated, wonderful glory, about freedom, and what it means to truly choose your own path, about home, and how sometimes home is not a place but a person, and about legacy, the things we leave behind when we are gone, the stories that get told about us, the ways we change the world simply by being in it. Lydia Owens had been traded for horses and supplies. Ryder Jackson had given double and set her free immediately after. And from that moment of pure kindness, of seeing someone's humanity when others saw only property, an entire world had been born. A ranch that thrived for generations. A family that grew and flourished and spread across Montana and beyond. A love story that became legend. And it all started with one man who walked into a saloon and decided that some things were worth more than money. That some things, like a person's freedom and dignity and right to choose their own destiny, were priceless. That was the legacy of Ryder and Lydia Jackson. That was what they left behind, and it was everything